name's Britni Eisenmann. I help industrial organizational students and grads get paid. And today I'm sitting here with...
I'm Lynn Juve. I help people make big career moves so that they can land into their dream job.
Lynn, I have a question for you about a topic that feels a little nebulous to me, so I'm hoping that you can give some definition to it.
Yeah.
How do I know if I'm in a toxic workplace or toxic work situation?
What it really comes down to is you. Part of why this became such an important topic for me, and without my realizing it, is because there's this side of it of like, I made a pivot myself, more people can do this, and a lot of the tools out there aren't helpful. But there's this other, more deeply personal side, which is my dream job became a nightmare for me.
Okay.
And we can dig into all the reasons why, but ultimately, what it came down to is I didn't feel happy there, and I felt miserable there, in fact. So I spent how much time saying to myself, I should be happy, right? Like on paper, this is what I wanted. Like, why am I not happy? And I knew why I wasn't happy. I knew what had happened. Very specific things had happened where I no longer felt valued. And I felt, I would say, paranoid because the way things were presented to me weren't very direct. So it was like, oh, this is the reputation you're getting. Those are the exact words that was used to me by a supervisor. And that completely screwed with my head, right? So you make that face, just super validating. And at the same time, it hit me harder because of who I am and what that meant to me and all these things. But ultimately what matters is if I'm not happy here, I have a right to be happy. And I think we're taught that if you don't appreciate, if you aren't happy at this job that pays well, that is the field that you wanted, that you previously loved, that like you don't have a right to change your mind, that you don't have a right not to be happy. And how you feel is how you feel. If you're not happy for any reason, really just being in tune with your feelings. And this is a whole wave we're seeing that's so exciting, which is it's okay to say, I think you can say both, I'm super grateful that I have a job. I'm very privileged that I make this much money. I'm lucky that I have work-life balance or whatever aspects of the job I do like. And I'm going to go look for something else because you know what? It's very possible that due to personalities, whatever, you're sitting in that job not happy. And if you left it, that's someone else's dream job that you're sitting in.
Oh, so my
you
word.
Can go be happy. Yep.
I had never
you're
thought
sitting
about
in someone else's dream job. Yep. It's just like dating, right? Like if that's not the person for you, let them go so that the person who is supposed to be with them can have them. It's that, and let them be with the person who's going to love them the same way, the same thing with jobs, right? You're sitting in someone else's dream job, trying to convince yourself that it should be good enough for you. And you want, the heart wants what the heart wants.
Yes. So it sounds like, tell me if I'm understanding this correctly, that if I'm in a toxic workplace, it's less that I need to blame them for the toxicity and more that I need to understand why this doesn't fit me. And it might feel toxic because it doesn't fit me. And it's not where I belong right now, but it could be a good fit for somebody else.
I'm quick to say, like, let's be angry about this. Like, it's okay to be angry about it. I think there's a time and space for that. And then there is a point we're going to move forward from it, right? So when you ask me, like, what is a toxic workplace? One of the reasons that I wanted to be like, let's talk about you, like, let's talk about who's ever going through this is because what it ultimately comes down to is like, what do you need? And sometimes it is like, I need to be angry about this and like, I need to process this. And it doesn't necessarily happen with me, but the thing is that when I tell people my own story is often, this is kind of how humans work, right? I don't feel comfortable being vulnerable with somebody until they're vulnerable with me a lot of times. So my approach to things, which I highly suspect from the few conversations that we've had is similar to you, is I don't come at this whole career coaching, job search strategy thing from like, I have all the answers. I come at it from like I eat, sleep, and breathe this stuff so I can give you the wider perspective. And I can be the one to keep up with what's going on instead of when your Uncle Arthur tells you that you have to have these exact numbers in your resume and you come from a field that doesn't have those, like you get all freaked out, right? So I can provide you some perspective on like, oh, in your field, that's great advice for someone who's investment banking or in sales, but you're not in that. It's okay that we're over here. You don't have to get freaked out by that.
So if I'm at a spot, I realize I'm in a toxic workplace for whatever reason, and I've made the decision, I need to figure out what's next. What does that look like?
So I think that that's a really hard decision to make. And I find that people are at this point where it's like they feel like they have to be 100% in or 100% out.
Hmm.
And I would say, give yourself permission, right? Thank you, Brandon Brown. Give yourself permission to dip your toe in the waters. I don't know what it is about us that says, like, I can't leave, I can't leave, I can't leave. And I'm like, no one's saying you have to leave. Why don't you just shop around? There's two things I've seen. The Ask a Manager column, which is amazing. If you haven't read it, she is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Talks about how she's seen so many people write into them. This is a whole on that toxic workplace thing. It's crazy. Who will ask a question about something, and she's like, they'll give me the context, and in the context, they're being essentially abused at work, like the worst, craziest situations, the worst bosses, and that's not even what their question's about. And it is to say, she basically says people are experiencing, like, forgive, I don't know if this is a good way to explain it, but it seems almost like a Stockholm syndrome of like, and I think that makes sense psychologically, right? Because if we once really cared about these people, if we once, we really often care about our boss's perspective, things like that, I think it makes sense that the way you get through day in and day out for the people that are sustaining you is to sort of like look past a lot of it, right? Or to like figure out how to adjust to it. And I don't know how much of that is just survival and how much of that is just how we're raised, because there are many people who are kind of in that mentality who could get another job, but it's a vicious cycle, right? Because you're in this environment where you feel very like you don't feel valued at all, right?
Yeah.
And so what happens is you feel your worst. You feel no matter who you are. And this is where, for me, reading Brene Brown has been like given me language to understand my own experiences, but also what happens at work, because that shame and fear trigger. You can be a super confident person. Shame and fear is separate than self-esteem. You can have very good self-esteem overall, but you can still have shame triggers. Mm-hmm. So for me, what happened at work was like someone hit on a shame trigger, right? My own boss said something that, so what he said was like the same thoughts and fears that I had, and I would never have worried that he thought that about me until he said those things, right? And so it became this like, you're like, okay, the last thing I want to do right now is go and put myself out there and go interview for a job. So I think that's why we try to talk ourselves out of it to some degree. Mm-hmm. And I do think sometimes it's scary to like dip our toe in the water, because when you apply to one or two jobs and then you don't get them, which often the first couple that you apply to, you're not going to get, especially like a lot of my clients are like, well, I'll just apply cold to these jobs, like passively. Right. And we know some people get their jobs by cold applying, but it's not like the majority. Yeah. And so if you don't get them, then it's like, oh, does that further dig into this like fear that I'm having? And I think that's where, when people can separate this, and for me, it comes from, and some of my friends, like during a difficult year, as I felt like I was falling back into like patterns that weren't healthy for me personally, one of my friends was like, do you journal? And I was like, yeah, something. And she's like, well, I do it every day, even if I feel like I don't need it. And I was like amazing, right?
Yeah.
And right, like whether it's therapy or like, that's the first thing is some of them toxic work environment, I'd encourage them to do is like sit with your feelings, which is not something I'm super comfortable doing, which is why destiny has put me in a position to like constantly hit me over the head and remind me I need to do this. And to, as I tell others to do it, is to like recognize that, because I get clients all the time that recognize it, or from whatever the work that they've done in the past. I have a lot of clients who come to me and they've already been through some shit in life and they kind of know. So like, I'll have a client come to me and they're like, I don't feel like myself right now. I am in a bad situation. But if you have enough awareness, and I wouldn't even say it's, people think confidence. Like confidence is like elusive thing that we talk about, but I think people use one word and it represents many different things, right? Mm-hmm. We don't actually know, if someone looks confident outside, we don't know how they're actually feeling in the inside. But I think I have clients that come to me and they're like, I sort of know I'm in this dark tunnel right now. And I know somewhere logically that I am qualified for more, and I know that I can get a new job, and I know that I'm getting out of this, but I can't do it by myself right now. And so this is why I need a job search strategist or a career coach. And so that's been really remarkable to see the clients who I think of people, I picture faces when I think about this. And I have a client who has openly said, like, use my name for whatever. She's on my website. Her name's Sarah Floyd. She says openly, I was in a toxic work environment. Mm-hmm. And to see, she's someone who came to me and for whatever reason recognized, well, I know you have to recognize that you're in this black hole. Otherwise you're like, oh my God, the world is ending. I'm not qualified for anything, right? I'll never get another job. Yes. She totally knew that. But at the same time, she knew she wasn't in a good environment. Mm. And so that she was at that exact point where I don't think it was, she had to go through a long period. I think because of where she was at in her life, she just recognized it right away and then sought me out. And, out of a toxic work environment, did a pivot from for-profit to nonprofit, went from sales to fundraising related, got her first senior director role. And out of all of that, it's for the American Heart Association. So she's super happy, super thrilled. And I say that for people because if you're in that black hole, and Sarah didn't have a name that you and I would know, like a household name universally on her resume. She didn't have like an Apple or like an Amazon or like a 3M or anything like that. So if people can hear this and recognize oh yeah, I'm feeling like total poop right now, but I think this is just because of my circumstance. If you can just kind of get out of it or recognize that for a moment, that's where you can seek out the help that you need. And sometimes it's therapy, sometimes it's career coach, sometimes it's both, right? Things like that.
Mm-hmm. But I appreciate how you say we have to be the ones to claw up to get that first breath of air so that we have some kind of framework and understanding that I need help. And then just choosing what the most appropriate help is. Therapy, coach, whatever.
Yeah. Well, and that isn't to say that everyone in a toxic work environment needs to hire someone. Mm-hmm. But I will say that when I think back to my own experiences, both my career experiences and my my business, for example, or any challenge I've taken on that's new, I previously had a really hard time investing in things. And then the things that I've invested in have just made the return on investment has been insane. Okay. But part of it is because I'm selecting the right things for me, right? So everyone out there, people who are listening to this, maybe Britni's for you, maybe I'm for you, maybe it's neither of us, and we're still going to cheer you on to find the person that's right for you. Yes. It doesn't have to be us, right? We're still here to lift you up and say, hey, you don't have to do this by yourself. It's not weak to ask for help, or you might be in a toxic work environment, be supportive to you. It doesn't, even if you follow our channel and listen to us, doesn't mean you're still going to hire us. There's two reasons to hire anyone, right? A person that's right for you. Uh-huh. One is because they already know what you're going to encounter. They can give you the roadmap for it. Uh-huh. And they should be able to tell you enough about that, right? Or you should see that in their marketing. Mm-hmm. And you should, that sounds like me. I've hit these sort of struggles, that sort of thing, right? So instead of you white knuckling through it for 6 months, a year, if that person can do it, help you get faster. And often I can't necessarily help my clients do it a lot faster depending on how they want to do something super specific or they are looking for a really high salary. Mm-hmm. But the idea is to help them either there's a return investment either for time or money or getting the exact job that you want. So there's a couple different things, right? Mm-hmm. So white knuckling it through it by yourself, is that really what you want to do? But then the other side is this. When you think about investing money in yourself, when you even make that consideration, you have to decide, yes, if I can find the perfect person for me, that's 50% of the equation, but you can find the perfect career coach for you and who knows exactly what they're doing, who's had success with lots of clients, but you have to believe in yourself. Mm-hmm. And it sounds so elementary, but the truth is if you are already convinced that this is not going to work for you, mm-hmm. if your subconscious has said, you know what, this is not possible, I just believe it's not possible, you're going to go out looking for evidence that it's not possible. And even if you hire someone, but often that's where your brain will go, well, wait a second, I don't want to invest this money because I don't think it's possible. Mm-hmm. And that's not about the career coach, that's about you, because you can hire whatever career coach you want.
Yeah.
So that's where I think starting to invest money in things is a good practice, even if it's starting little, because then you get to say like, oh, I'm worth it, right? And I would encourage people to think about like, how much money do you spend on clothes? How much money do you spend on things like that, like your hair?
Mm-hmm.
And what is that giving you versus investing in your career? When you invest in something that's going to give you a return on investment, obviously you have more money to spend on other things. And to your point earlier, to help other people, right? The success you have is going to allow you both financially, and the higher you get, the more you're going to be able to help other people. And a lot of the people that follow you, I know this because of who you are and who I follow, that's a big part of their goal in life is like, I want to have a career that's going to be mission based, either help the environment, help others, have a more diverse environment, whatever it is. It's okay to be ambitious and want to help people at the same time. And I think those two things actually work together very well.
Yeah. Yeah. I hate that I learned that so late, but I also feel like because it was such a revelation to me, like I cling to that so firmly. Like, what are we doing if we're not, becoming who we're supposed to be so that we can lift up
Yeah.
everyone around us to be who they're supposed to be?
Yeah. I hit up not long ago against another ceiling for myself,
Okay.
another thing that I had to overcome in my money mindset. And I learned this from Rachel Rogers. I think even if she mostly talks to entrepreneurs, if you guys haven't heard of Rachel Rogers, she's an amazing podcast. I first came to learn about her through a video she did on how to have an anti-racist business.
Okay.
And I think it's really important that since I've been able to, like, it feeds into the work I do with my clients to be doing those mindset work on my own and also give credit to that, right?
Mm-hmm.
I realized that there was an exercise I was doing. It was like one moment, right? There were a bunch of videos. It was a great program that she has. But there was one moment and it said, what is one of the beliefs about money that you have from childhood or something like that?
Okay. Yeah.
And I wrote down that you can't help people and like earn good money, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And I wrote it down and I was like, oh, because I started out as a high school teacher and went directly into a school with like 90 some percent free and reduced lunch, which is how you
Okay. Mm-hmm.
kind of
Yeah.
talk about fluency. And I got paid well for a teacher,
Mm-hmm.
but as I moved into business, that became, that when you negotiate salary, it's like, you should negotiate salary or like the way that a lot of people, the things that are out there to teach us is like market value, but often how we negotiate salary or think about like how much money we want to charge in our businesses is based on our money mindset and our own worth and our own ideas about money.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So not actually about like it's not logical, it's emotional, right? And if no one thinks it's
Yes.
emotional, I have two questions for you about money. And this is what I ask people when you talk about salary negotiation. Two things. One, if I told you I had an amazing face cream that I love, like moisturizer, whatever, and I paid $4 for like the whole like 8-ounce container of it, would you even consider it? Because I wouldn't.
Yeah.
Right? Like money percepts are, and the other one would be just purely numbers. If you always wore a size 8 and you went into a store and you didn't fit into that 8 there,
Mm-hmm.
would you try on a 10 or would you just not buy that thing? Because a lot of people I know just wouldn't buy that thing because we have an emotional attachment to those numbers.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So yeah, mindset is huge in the way that we take on everything in life.
Yes. Yes. When I first started my business, I knew that I wanted to have value-based pricing. So I learned everything I could about that, including like empirically researched papers on it. But I realized I couldn't do it. Like I couldn't actually charge value-based pricing until I believed it, that I was worth that. And that was a barrier I hadn't anticipated hitting.
Yeah, it's that stuff is tricky, and some people have some of those mindset challenges in negotiating salary,
Mm-hmm.
and I think like for me, and I know other people who've been more comfortable negotiating salary than they are with the pricing side of it in a business because like where you're getting the money from, I think, or
Mm-hmm.
you feel like you have different standards. When it's just you, it can be vulnerable to say like it's just me as opposed to like a business. It's
Yeah.
a different environment, when you're an employee
Yes.
for sure.
Do you find that when you explain that you can tick all the boxes and be grateful for that, but you can also know that you need to leave, that is an aha moment for clients? Like, when you explain that, do you see a light bulb go on?
There's a moment when people decide I'm going to, and I'm sure you see this as well, I'm going to invest time and money in, and it could be a small amount of money, it could be a large amount of money in my own career and making a change. So by the time people come to me and are ready to make an investment, they've already come to that conclusion.
Okay.
So these are the conversations we're having where we want to talk to people. I say we because I know that you're like, it's very important for you to help people as well, beyond even people who necessarily work with you directly. And to say, like, my message to people is like, it's okay to feel how you feel, all the things we just talked about. And so that you can do what you need to do, because it's kind of like anything. It's like, for me, it was like, I think it might parallel the stages of grief, right? Because this was the dream job and then it wasn't. And it's like, oh, wait, when did that flip happen? Like, happened to me overnight, essentially, right? I didn't go look for another job right away. It took me months to do it. And my hope is that people will go through their own process of saying that this is okay. And it could take a week and it could take longer. But I hope to help people get through that process more quickly. I don't want you to sit and be miserable for a long time. And I don't want this whole, a lot of times this whole I should feel this way or I shouldn't feel this way is a stick we beat ourselves with. So it's like that, trying to talk about that self-compassion element of it. I see that everywhere right now. I see that in like Alicia Keys' book. I see that in Brene Brown's work. I see that in Untamed. I see that in all the themes right now is like, we were raised to think that the way we motivate ourselves and be successful is to hate on ourselves and in a very secret way. If we think, I never thought I was hard on myself. And then it took me a while to realize these like shoulds were the thing that I would get myself with. And so I think a lot of my clients go through that process as well. And there's still some of that. A recent one I saw was more around a client thinking about making a career change, and her ambition was very like, she never alluded to any ambition at all. When we can get through it, it was like, I'm pretty happy in my field, but like, something's calling me and I want more. Like, you sound ambitious, but we're taught that that's like, what if you do want to leave and not be in the public sector and make more money? Like, that's a very hard thing and it's often embedded in our childhood because the career we pick is often so closely linked to, like, I mean, for me, like my parents, right? So to have a career shift is often to have an identity shift, and that comes with all kinds of emotions. And so throw on like a workplace where you're confused and you're not feeling great, and it's like a whole big soup of things to work through.
Yes. I was definitely 30, 32, something in there when I finally identified that I had taken on a belief as a child that if something I didn't benefit other people, that it was a selfish thing.
Yep.
And then I took the Clifton Strengths assessment, the Strengths Finder assessment. And I realized,
big fan.
Yeah, there's stuff embedded in me that's not skills, that's part of who I am. And then I realized I'd better be doing these things to better my planet, if nothing else for my kids. But I want people doing what they're good at. And that's gonna benefit other people. But it's not selfish to do things that drive you toward your natural strengths. That was such a huge pivot in my mindset that opened up a whole new world, a whole new career.
Totally. We're socialized to think that, I think this is gendered. I think that there's probably breakdowns too, with race. I think I follow like this really awesome non-binary person, and I look at everything that they're talking about and how that seems, it's just so human, and the struggles that we all have, right? Not that we can compare, like I have a lot of privilege, right? But I think that I see women left and right. I called it for a while. I'm like, if one more woman tries to jump out of the lifeboat, because that was the analogy for me of like, if you're already in the lifeboat and there's enough space for you, like, why are you jumping out? And I know it's not that simple because a lot of people do recognize their privilege. So they're like, do I need to move over? Do I need to move to someone else? But when it comes to the career thing, it's like I think it goes back to like, if you're in a work environment you're not happy with, for example, that you're not really helping anyone by staying there, right? You're not lifting anyone else up. You're not benefiting anyone else. And a lot of times, to your point, the thing that, like, I think we have to take care of ourselves to a degree before we can take care of other people at all. Like, a lot of times, if we're neglecting ourselves, that's going to negatively affect other people. And we're, like, to your point, you're not going to be able to serve other people.
Mm-hmm.
So those identities, like you say, it took me this long to figure out. I suspect that from the work I do with people and the work that I do on my own, that we're going to continue to hit different feelings throughout our lives, where we're going to have all these realizations. And that was an interesting one to be like. I had a friend who's a Brene Brown coach, and she, part of our co-working spaces program, she led. And I remember being very upset and saying to her, like, why am I still struggling with certain things I'm struggling with in my life? And these were very personal things.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, I was like, why didn't I work through this 10 years ago when I was trying to deal with this? And she's like, because that's life. And I was like, oh crap. This is like, there's going to be a new struggle every day. Like, there's no way to escape it. Right. But it's like, that's such a hard thing, and it's so funny. Like, this has quickly become a conversation about identity and feelings. But I really, truly believe, and I would say I don't want to steal this, because I feel like the first person who put this, it's so simple but eloquently, I think it was Sheryl Sandberg, even though Lynn now feels so dated, like, just want to throw that out there. But she said, like, work and life, there really isn't, like, we try to make this separation. And I think now we're seeing that people are understanding that there isn't, especially for women, especially, when the less privilege you have, the less you can delineate that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I completely agree. Do you think that as women, and specifically as white women, we need to be careful that we don't call every challenge a glass ceiling, or even think of it that way? That we need to be really clear-eyed about what is actually a glass ceiling and what's just a challenge. It's a theme that has visited our life again, and maybe we're revisiting it like we did 10 years ago.
I think we should constantly think about every challenge in that context. So maybe instead of thinking about them, because it's really, for so long, it felt like, here was my perception of it, right? Like, when Lynn came along, when Sheryl Sandberg came along, I was like, oh my gosh, I feel like she's talking about this in a way no one's talked about it.
Yeah.
But then a few years later, I was like, the word intersectional feminism came up, and I was like, what is that? Like, I didn't know what that was. And it's embarrassing. And I can try to make the excuse that, like, I lived abroad for 5 years and didn't know what Uber was. Like, my first time in Uber, I was, like, very confused. I was like, how do you know each other? Super funny. I'd been catching up to do when I got back.
Yeah.
But I think it is privilege. I never have to think about that, because it didn't affect me. And being abroad, I was even more privileged in that environment. Mm-hmm. So I think that every work challenge that we have, like, when I look at what happened to me, I think that it probably was gendered, but it goes back to, like, it doesn't really matter why it happened. What matters is how I felt about it and what I want to do about it, in terms of, like, I don't want to be here anymore. Let's go out. So maybe it's kind of a trick question, where if we start to think about everything that way, mm-hmm. and it's okay to acknowledge that, and then there's that secondary piece of, like, what do I want to do about this? Mm-hmm. I think, on my mind in particular this week is how to not accidentally, I keep seeing examples of, like, I don't want to be that. And I think you see it as white women, we're, like, very quick to be like, not me. And we're so sensitive to that. And it's like, well, yeah, me, because I know that I have biases that I have to address. Right. Mm-hmm. I want to say something on the other side of this too. Okay. People will come to me and say, I'm running into, let's use for example, I'm running into ageism. Yes, that is totally real. That is happening to you. I want to validate that. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about how to combat that as best we can. So I understand that what I do is the equivalent of walking along a beach and trying to throw the clams that have washed up back in the ocean one by one. Okay. Right? I'm only one person. And part of my brain wants to go, how can we do more? I think we always want to do more. The other part of my brain is like, I am only one person. I'm not a savior to anyone either, right? And so I constantly thinking about, how can I make sure that the clientele I'm serving is more diverse and is not just wealthy people and all of that. And that's going to take me time. And I'm like, I try to think about that every single day. Mm-hmm. But when we get into the ageism thing, and this is where our jobs are tricky because we are, I think, helping clients navigate bias all the time as best as we can. And so when I tell someone like, you're up against ageism, I'm like, what do we know? How can we fight that as best as possible? How can we overcome that as best as possible? And I'm like, here's what I can tell you. I had a client who got back into tech after 20 years of not having a paid gig. So not only not working in tech, but not having a paid gig. And was ageism working against her? Absolutely. Absolutely it was. But there came that moment where she was being interviewed by, she was up for a contract job, right? So for a lot of people, isn't quite as desirable. Sometimes a lot of people go to contract on purpose at certain points in their life. And I don't know what was said because it sounds like some of these things that were said probably weren't things that should have been said based on how hiring was. However, she was told later that the recruiting firm said to AWS, like Amazon Web Services, was like, stop sending us people that are so young. So I don't know if she changed that word or if that was actually said, but apparently they felt like the people they were getting didn't have enough business acumen, life experience. I don't know. So it seems like what happened as a result of that was the recruiting firm was like, well, let's send them the antithesis of that. Let's try to find the person that we know is not going to come off as naive or young or whatever. And so they pulled her resume, and because all of her tech experience was, 20 years old, but she had great experience. And just like that, she is back in the game. It was for her, it was definitely the stepping stone role of the contracting for AWS. And then 6-9 months later, she's back a Microsoft role for 3 times as much money. So it's like, yes, that's happening to you, especially with ageism. That's one that I feel comfortable working with. There are a lot of people. One of my close friends said to me 2 weeks ago, like, if I were going to hire a career coach, I would hire a woman of color because I'm a woman of color. And I'd be like, absolutely. Like, I have women of color in my program, but find the person that's going to help you with what you can, because there's a lot of things I can't speak to in that area. The ageism one, I haven't had personal experience, but I feel like I know enough on how to navigate it. And maybe there is someone out there who specializes more in that, and maybe that's a better person for you, depending on how you feel about the situation you're in.
Yeah.
It's a big question. So I gave you 2 different.
No, it's great. It's great. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I feel like, I had 2 big lessons that were driven home for me personally in 2020. One was consistency is king. It used to be a bad word in my life, but consistency is king. But the second one was a true understanding of what it means to stay in your lane and the worth of that. I used to roll my eyes when people said, stay in your lane. And after 2020, I understand, like, there's areas I will never go. And ethically, I shouldn't go. I don't belong there. And if I come across somebody that needs that service, I need to know, like, have in the back of my mind 3 or 4 people, places I could send them, because they'll get better services to that person. And it's maybe more ethical.
Yeah. That one, if it comes to things like, those types of life experiences that we can't relate to, that's one thing. I also think it's a lot of times, sometimes we're afraid. This is what you see from like clients, right? Is they're like, well, I'm not ready for that. And you're like, yeah, you are. You know what I'm saying? So there's that element of things too.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So you alluded to this client that you helped get back in after she had been out of the workforce for 20 years. And you like lit up when you were talking about this. It really seems like this is a demographic that you love to work with. So tell me more about that, like other people that you've helped that are re-entering work after time away, because I assume that comes with its own mindset challenges too, and real logistical challenges.
I would say, I want to be clear about saying people are the same and different, right? I think the thing that we do is it's really important to both be what it means to be an expert, if I can use that word, is we eat, sleep, and breathe the career stuff. So we're looking at like on a weekly basis, monthly basis, what are recruiters asking for, what are hiring managers asking for, what are the trends in hiring, like to keep up with that, because that stuff is changing. It's really confusing. But then to also be to say what works overall, but then how are you unique, and making sure that we understand how to tailor these things to you, and you understand what applies to you and what might not apply to you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a balance that's really important and tricky in this, like to be customized enough, but if we're not making it up as we go, as if what I've done has never been done before, right? You come to us because we have experience in this area. So overall, I would say that a lot of surprisingly, there's 3 buckets that I'd say face similar challenges.
Okay.
And one is, as you probably like, making a big career pivot, because then there's this whole like, how do I translate this? Am I worth it? Like, are people going to hire me and see it? I'm coming back into the workforce. Yeah, I have great experience, but like, how old is that? Like, you yourself questioned a little bit, like,
Mm-hmm.
am I going to struggle? And then also, like, are people going to get it and hire me?
Mm-hmm.
And then the toxic work environment ones, for all the things we've talked about of, well, no one values me in the moment. I'm just getting negative feedback all the time. We're human. That's going to affect you and affect your perception, like, of going out there if you're hearing that negative feedback all the time, right? So those are the 3 people I work with the most.
Okay.
The 3 types of groups that to me are all one person. I'm trying to do something that feels really big and hard.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to settle. I want to be in my dream job, but I also have this like challenge to overcome. So when it comes to people that are returning,
Mm-hmm.
I think I light up anytime you're seeing me like picture a face because I love my clients so much. And when I get to tell these stories, I'm thinking of like, as I'm talking to someone across the screen, hearing that and going, I hope the takeaway is, if they did it, I can do it too.
Uh-huh.
Right? Whether or not you hire someone, it is possible, knowing it's possible.
Uh-huh.
And so to say, like, I can get back into the workforce. I have a lot of people come to me and say, I was laid off 9 months ago and I still haven't found a job. And they're like so terrified, or like, I left my job 2 years ago to focus on raising my children, or a host of reasons. I talked to a woman once who had a stroke right after she finished grad school in her early 30s,
Okay.
late 20s,
Yeah.
all kinds of things, right? People think like it's not always, parenthood is a big reason, but it's not always the reason.
Yeah. Yeah.
42% of women take breaks, and I wish I had the stats on men because I think that that's also increasing.
Okay.
And maybe we'll see some of those stats come out of COVID.
Yeah.
So for someone to leave and come back, people come to me all the time and they've been out of the workforce for a while, and in their mind is a while, and I'm like, oh, that doesn't even hit the radar. So what I've seen, and I'm largely basing this on other professionals that specialize in helping people get back into the workforce. Mm-hmm. I have not seen the data on this, but it seems like anecdotally has been true is if it's less than 2 years, mm-hmm. I don't think you have to stress. So that being said, if it's more than 2 years, that's where you may want to seek out help in some capacity, mm-hmm. because that's where you may run up against some challenges. But it's less than 2 years, you may not need to hire help to have someone to get back into the workforce. And that's not a hard and fast rule by any means.
Yeah.
So I think the thing for most people to realize is that in the hiring process, there's so much that there's what we see in the job description, and it looks like it's all equal. And it looks like, okay, we have to have this, we don't have this, we're out of it. But there's so many soft skills, and there's so many things that are not written in that job description that an employer is looking for. And here's how we know this. On paper, we can pretty much tell what people have done, what they haven't done, right? Like the people that get interviewed are essentially really similar on paper. It doesn't mean that they don't have different skill sets, but like if I look at the job description, I'm like, I'm going to interview this person and they have 60% of requirements. Interview this person has 60% of the requirements. They're going to be different things that they have, but essentially they're going to be some subset of those skills, right? And I'm going to trade off someone who, has used this software for someone who has more project management, whatever it is, right? It's a trade-off.
Yeah.
So I have to decide from there. They're often not deciding on whether they're going to hire someone as much based on the hard skills as the soft skills. And we have the biggest piece of evidence we have for that is the way the interviews are done.
Okay. Tell me about that.
Well, when we think about this, and this is where bias really starts to play a big part into this. Uh-huh. So why do we do interviews on video? Why do we want to hear the person's voice and see the person's face? Because
right?
we're largely picking someone, and research shows this. The book Blind Spot, I highly encourage people to read that book. Although it probably will tell a lot of you things you already know. You're largely getting hired based on whether the hiring people who are interviewing you like you and relate to you and connect with you.
Mm-hmm.
So that's bad. Overall, that will lead hiring managers to make the wrong decisions, to the point where a hiring manager who openly says, I hire almost completely on gut, they would be better off, statistically, this is true, they would be better off flipping in a coin
mm-hmm.
or doing some random hiring based on who they're interviewing than actually going with their gut, because their gut is more wrong than right. And there's a time we use our gut, right, to make decisions. Mm-hmm. When it comes to hiring, that's not a time you use your gut, because that's going to, like, it's going to tell you, like, oh, I really like this person. I relate to this person. I'm connecting to this person because they remind me of myself. That thinking will actually lead to bad hiring, not only non-diverse hiring, but bad hiring, because we will overlook something. And when I say we, as a hiring manager, I've done it. Mm-hmm. We will overlook something that we shouldn't overlook because we like the person, right? Like, there'll be some red flags that person might not be a good fit for this job, mm-hmm. for this role, for this company, whatever it is.
Yes.
So I always tell people, and this really should be encouraging for those people who are looking to get back into the workforce. But again, also if you are making a pivot or just haven't looked for a job for a really long time, like maybe you've been at the same company for a really long time, mm-hmm. or you're in a toxic work environment, there are 3 reasons you get hired.
Okay.
The only things that essentially matter. Number 1 is, are you qualified? Yes, that matters, right? You have to be qualified, but that's way more gray than people think it is. Mm-hmm. Because you have these other factors. Number 2, are we going to like working with you? This is the hardest thing to gauge from the interview process. What we're trying to figure out, are you going to like stay in your lane? Like, are you going to do the work that's required of you? Mm-hmm. And are you not going to be drama? So are you off, like, do people hate working with you? Harvard Business Review talks about how when people pick a coworker for a project, they pick the person they like the most, shocker, not the person who's the expert. Because mm-hmm. ultimately it's going to be harder to work as a team if you don't get along, right? Mm-hmm. And so we're worried about, like, are you going to stay in your lane? Or are you going to go try to do other projects and not do what's asked of you? Things like that, right? And then the last one is, are you going to like working here? This is usually where we think about retention. So it's like, if someone tells you you're overqualified, they're worried that you're going to leave quickly. But a lot of times the biggest risk for a hiring manager isn't that you're going to leave if you don't like it. The biggest risk is that you're going to get past the 90 days, past the honeymoon period, and you're going to be mediocre. You're just going to do your job, right? And as we know, on the other side of this, some of us stay in a job we don't like for longer than we should. I'm not saying that you don't work hard, mm-hmm. but what they're looking for is that person that is going to put that extra effort in, right? So you've all worked with people who love their job. And it doesn't mean that you have to love it more than your family, your life, whatever, but that put that extra thing in. It's like, oh, this week we have to work a few more hours because we really want to get this project done that's really important to us.
Yeah.
That's what they want to see, is that person who's going to go above and beyond. There are the other non-tangibles, like how quick, fast of a learner are you and things. But if you have the desire and you're easy to work with and all these things, these are where the bigger hiring risks are represented. And that's why we do the in-person interview or the video interview now. So those things work to a benefit of someone who, like my client, she's a great example, thought back in up to 20 years. When she started talking and asked someone, they knew she knew her stuff right away. Uh-huh. Right? They could tell. So she's a great interviewer because she knows technology. And you can tell that she's kept up on the technology because she can easily tell you about how she creates pivot tables on her own and she does these things. And so it's easy to demonstrate that they can tell that she has been learning since she's been gone, for example. Mm-hmm. So overcoming that objection. So when we look at it that way, that's why pivots are possible too, because there is a subset of skills that people have that transfer. Yeah. And often we don't know how to name it or look for it, but when we see it in an interview, we can recognize it. We're like, oh, look at the process that they went through to create that program. This might be a different industry, but those steps would work in this situation. Mm-hmm. So if you've been out of work for 20 years, and I always give that example because most people that come to me haven't been out for 20 years. And 2021, what's the difference? So if you've been out, you can totally get back in. And I think she represents, because she's coming from tech, that's the hardest industry to get out and back into.
Yeah.
And so if you're in a different industry, it is totally feasible.
So I know you have a program, and I have resisted asking you about it because I wanted to hear about it live here while we're doing the interview. So yeah. So I know that it's called Level Up, which I love that title. That totally like jives with what I'm all about too. So tell me about Level Up. Who is the person that really benefits from this program and what it looks like?
This is my cornerstone program. It's running almost all the time. And this is for people who are looking to land their dream job. And usually they're looking at this program because they have something that, it's a big career move for them for whatever reason. So it's either because they're pivoting, because they're coming back from a break, they're in a toxic work environment, or they just haven't looked for a job for a long time. Now we're going to see, 2020, 2021, we're going to see more people who've been laid off, which I think is sometimes you have a small gap there, but also that can screw with your head a little bit as well, right? And so this is a group career coaching program, which I would encourage people in general to seek out group programs and consider them, because they are a great return on investment and they're a great value, whether it's my group program or someone else's group program. So my program has the live components and has the self-paced components. So we get together every single week for 12 weeks and we go through the curriculum together. I have a master's in education, so I love creating group programs. And it's designed in a way that research supports. The best way for you to learn this material is for us to go through examples. So you'll watch videos that are things that I can easily tell you through video. You'll do some reflecting, and then we'll take your questions and challenges during the session. But instead of just doing a Q&A where you might be confused but you're not sure what to ask, we go through specific examples of people's exercises. So we look at their specific resumes. We look at a recorded mock interview. We look at those types of things so that you can see like, oh, I wouldn't even thought not to do that. Or, yeah, I wouldn't know what is an example of a good resume that it doesn't have sales numbers in it look like. And then we're able to work through those things together. And typically the cohort is very quick to share, like, these are the tough situations I've been through at work, or here's my fears. And that's what makes it really exciting, is to see them all learn from each other. And one of the biggest pieces of feedback I get is it's so helpful to be in a group to realize that these people that have amazing career experiences feel the same way that I do and have the same worries that I do.
Where can people find you online?
Yeah. If you like watching videos, probably the best place is Instagram. I'm at Bespoke Professional. You can also follow me on LinkedIn, Lynn Juve, Jube, and also on Facebook, Bespoke Professional.
All right. Well, I will put those links below anywhere that this video is located so that people can just click and get the benefit from learning more about what you have to share. Thank you so much for being with me today. It was a great conversation. I appreciated it.
Thank you so much. This was so much fun. It is such a joy to talk to you as well.